All right, so next we're going to hear from Jake Ruygt. And Jake is mostly retired now from a long career of landscape maintenance, and still doing it a little bit just to keep healthy, keep busy. And but he's also conducting floristic surveys for the local land trust now that he has more time. He's published the Flora of Napa County, excuse me. I live in Nevada County now, which you can purchase from the CMPS booth over there. It's just out. I just got mine. So let's hear from Jake about inspirations and development of a flora of Napa County and some lessons learned. Jake.
Okay, well, it's great to be here, seeing all the great work that's being done to understand and preserve our native flora. This is a very challenging time. So thank you for being here to hear my story about how my flora of Napa County came to be. For a period before my book made it into print, I was being asked how long it took to complete it. I had no simple answer. Writing a county flora is a process that includes a number of overlapping stages. I didn't set out one day to write the flora. The idea just grew on me. The first stage is the inspiration that came from the people and places and events in my life. My family was deeply involved in horticulture. I had two uncles that started a family nursery, and my father worked there for 16 years until he started his own landscape maintenance business. I even did some piecework there at a very young age with my siblings. I did landscape maintenance work for a cousin to help pay my way through college, something that wouldn't work anymore. So when I entered UC Davis, it was my intent to be a wildlife biologist. The curriculum included a course in plant taxonomy and one in plant ecology, and I had to purchase the Big Red Book, A California Flora by Munz and Keck. Both courses took me into the field, and I was quickly impressed by the variety and beauty of our native plants. The Big Red Book became a gateway. Following college, I took on some landscape maintenance work while I looked for employment as a wildlife biologist. The wildlife job didn't pan out, but by then I had discovered my passion in studying native plants. I explored open spaces and roadsides near Napa, then began to venture further away. This was done in my free time. So a major stage in the process of becoming familiar with the local plant species. This required a tremendous amount of time in the field and under the microscope with focus on detail. I estimated I spent conservatively at least 6,000 hours in the field. Originally, I carried my Munz in the field, but I found the heavy book inconvenient, and keying took up precious field time. So I resorted to collecting small plant samples and placing them in a plastic bag for more careful study at home. I carried a plant press and notebook for new and interesting plant finds. Pressing plant specimens is a great way for the historic value of plant distribution, but I also found them very useful for repeated review of identifications. More than once, I discovered a specimen I had misidentified and realized that I had another species to add to my flora. And over the years, I found a few undescribed species after reviewing my herbarium collections. I put together numerous checklists by hand in the early years. It was my practice to collect small samples of all the plants I observed in an area, take them home, and spread them out on the table. This made it easy to write them up. A dissecting microscope, which was purchased through the help of CNPS, was a tremendous aid in plant identification. The PC replaced the handwritten list in the 1990s, and a GPS receiver made recording locations much more accurate after 2000. I became a member of the California Native Plant Society in 1979, and I found it very beneficial to join the scheduled outings. It introduced me to new locations. The outing leaders helped to reinforce my identifications and correct my errors. I also enjoyed sharing what I knew with others. Through CNPS, I discovered that the Pacific Union College Biology Department was working on a computer database of their herbarium collections, called the Specimen Label Information Directory, or SLID. Professor Gilbert Muth and CNPS member Joe Calizzo, who was our president at the time, were the main drivers of that project. I was anxious to contribute. The last printed version from 1985 included about 1,565 taxa with confirmed occurrences. CNPS membership also led to relationships with some landowners that helped me gain regular access to some amazing landscapes and led me to some exciting findings. In 1988, I was becoming familiar enough with the flora that I started getting requests to do botanical consulting. So I established Napa Botanical Survey Services. The work opened up an increasing amount of wildlands to my exploration. The PUC database unfortunately crashed in the late 1980s, and I was confronted with what to do with the information that I continued to gather. It was my hope that the database would be restored, but that never happened. About 1990, I realized I could now create my own computer database. My wife, April, was instrumental in helping me set it up. A first draft with 9 data fields was printed in 1992. The second draft was printed in 1996 and included 12 data fields. I also started a slide photo file and started a folder of simple pencil illustrations. I ended up replacing all the slide photos with digital photos because they were much more easy to work with and manage. About 2000, I felt I was ready to transfer my database into a rich text file. My database had to be cut and pasted to rearrange the text the way I wanted it. This was time-consuming, but was completed by 2001. To make the species accounts more useful, I created plant keys. My keys were based on the design and many of the key characteristics used by MUNs. I printed up a small booklet of keys and distributed them to a few CNPS members who were willing and able to put the keys to the test. I spent time in 9 wildland parks in the county to inventory plants in each of them. My second text draft included acronyms for the parks to indicate where people could easily go to see those plants. I also provided an abundance descriptor for each species based on my analysis in 2000. Plants I recognized as infrequent got more detailed range descriptions, and while plants listed as rare were detailed with location, collector's name and number, year and herbaria where they were housed. I also added details on morphology that included measurements that I had taken from my own specimens. To make the next major stage of the flora was in a data review. Confirming proper identification of species was critical to making the flora plausible. My personal herbarium collection supported 95% of the species, so these were easy to review, but about 5% of the species had to be tracked down in outside herbaria. A few species were not supported by voucher collections, so I had to make judgment calls on their accuracy. I also had to review, or felt I had to review all the rare species reports for the county. So I looked at those collections. A few botanists provided substantial historical documentation in notebooks and other records. Dr. Peter Raven studied the Napa County flora while he was a student in high school and created a 3x5 card file. John Thomas Howell led some field trips near Calistoga and published his findings. Willis Lynn Jepson had an affinity for Napa County that kept him active in the county for over 50 years. There also were a number of historic checklists of great value in my flora. These included a UC Davis Botany class syllabus by Jack Major, It was a long checklist of over 1,200 species. And a list of the North Coast ranges created by Milo Baker. A handful of botanists also contributed a large number of voucher specimens to the record. When the Consortium of California Berry came online about 2000, it became much more convenient to search for historic voucher collections. But Cal Academy specimens were not included on this site until more recently, so I had to make a number of trips to Cal Academy. So another stage is, to be thorough, I had to create a series of checklists of questions regarding data gaps. This directed my field efforts and herbarium searches for a number of years. The Jepson Manual went through 2 taxonomic updates while I was working on my flora. This required numerous changes to species as well as plant families. Many species had to be moved around and I had to revise keys accordingly. A bit of a nightmare, but it was all for the good in the long run. So what's included in the Napa Flora? The introduction includes 12 chapters covering subjects such as local history of human interaction with the flora, information on rare plants, and invasive species. The text treats 1,695 taxa, in addition to some additions at the end. I also included maps of vegetation, geology, rainfall, and geography. The flora includes a total of 43 color plates of 334 taxa. These were chosen from over 1,200 slides that I had, or 1,200 images that I had. Excuse me. The final selection process focused on showy plants, common plants, rare plants, and invasive species. There's a similar process for the illustrations. I chose from over 1,000 drawings that I had made over the space of about 5 years, but I had to look at the image quality in order to make the final decision. So the completion of illustrations was a special undertaking that required cutting and pasting of images, adding in notations as well as reference pages and species labels. This was done by Jeff DeCourcy, a graphic artist. There's so many people that have contributed to the data pool for Napa County, and I felt it was necessary to acknowledge their contributions in one of the introductory chapters. I included the year that they were active in the county and the number of collections they'd contributed. I signed a contract with CNPS in 2014, and my manuscript was delivered to the book designer. The process of assembling and polishing the final product was unexpectedly drawn out. Of greatest impact was the transfer of my files into a program that was not fully compatible. The 5-year finishing process prompted the addition of an addendum to provide taxonomic updates and with the additional several species discovered in the interim. So some lessons that I learned from this experience: make your contract as detailed as you can regarding terms and duties, get a cost estimate by the book designer, and get an estimated timeline for the completion. So there are real benefits to writing a local flora. It greatly simplifies the identification process. A local flora can also include much more detail on habitat, distribution, and abundance. It is also a very useful reference to a variety of local interests and organizations. So I would like to recognize the generosity of the financial contributors and the unwavering support of the Napa Valley chapter of CNPS. Finally, I would like to thank my wife, April, for always being there to help me get through technical glitches, and my daughter, Andrea, who found me an affordable book printer when it looked like the floor was going to get derailed in the home stretch. Okay, so are there any questions?
Thanks for your talk. Would you give us just a few highlights of kind of the favorite things that you found and put in the book, and will you be signing copies at the table later?
Well, I mean, discovering a new species is really exhilarating, you know, and there was a few things that, like I said, that were uncovered through my research and basically my own specimens over time. But there's still a few things that are out there that I think are, you know, that I need to investigate further. But yeah, those are the highlights. And one of them is shown there at the bottom of the photo there, Mead's owl's clover, which actually 2 species were discovered in the same geographic area in Napa County, kind of this higher elevation of the volcanics in the center of the county. Very fascinating area to me.
This isn't exactly a question, but I looked up on Google what magnum opus means. This is awesome work. I want to congratulate you. I'm inspired to tears. What a benefit to all of us. Thank you.
You're welcome.